Well, hello, I'm Charlie Johnson, and I'm from Madison, South Dakota, and I'm involved with Johnson Farms. It involves actual 4 partners, my brother Alan, my brother Kevin, and my son Jordan. We operate on about 2,400 acres in southern Lake County. We use a 6-year crop rotation. About 1,600 and some acres are in tillable rotation. We grow corn, oats, soybeans, and alfalfa. I like to compare our rotation to the days of the week. And so we start with Monday. We start with oats as a small grain, and we use that as a nurse crop for the alfalfa that we sow with the oats. Tuesday and Wednesday is alfalfa hay. Thursday we switch to soybeans. Thursday afternoon, after soybean harvest, we incorporate a winter rye to be used as a green manure on Friday morning. Friday morning we grow corn, and then Saturday we go back to soybeans one last time, and then on Sunday's our day of rest, and Monday we're back to our 6-year rotation again. So we divide our tillable acres pretty much into those equal portions. So about 250 to 275 acres is dedicated to each of those 6-year portions of our crop rotation. We have a cow-calf herd of about 180 head. We don't certify them organic necessarily, but they do utilize the forages that are produced on our farm in the process. So we've been organic since 1976. That's the year that my dad and my uncle decided we were going to go cold turkey. And so it was perhaps a good year to go to make that transition, because if people remember back that far, 76 was a big drought year in South Dakota. So nothing grew anyhow, whether you were conventional or organic. And so, but we have persevered through all those years. We actually are going to be entering into our 50th year in this cropping year now, being organic here in South Dakota. I'd say that it's been a wonderful venture and something that we've enjoyed. There's been challenges, of course, and I'm humbled enough to say that regardless of how you think you're getting a grasp on things, there's always a new challenge that comes up every year. That's the fun part in a way. You can anticipate that there'll be a challenge. Going organic is probably something you should really give a serious thought to, because it requires a grasp of operation of equipment. It requires a knowledge of agronomy, markets, paperwork, certification, general overall management, working with your lender, working with landlords, working with the fellow farming members. And so I say that really organic farming is kind of a fun aspect. It does bring out the manager in you in a great way. Well, the transition to organic farming involves fortitude, perseverance, persistence, but also takes on a little bit of imagination of having some fun, and also about bringing family into the operation, because what you're doing is you're bringing the farmer back into farming. And so with organic farming, it's about operating a cultivator, it's about operating a hay machine, a seeding machine, cleaning seed, preparing a bend site, doing the marketing. But I also think that it's important that as you get into organic farming, there's going to be setbacks. And I think you have to anticipate that. Also remember that, what you're doing is good for the land. My dad, my late father, had a litmus test for his farm, and he was not going to allow any substance to go onto his soil and his land unless he could first put it on his tongue without it harming him. And so that might be somewhat comical, but some people say, well, what about manure if he puts that on his tongue? Well, it probably is going to kill you, but in essence, you have to realize that the land itself, the soil itself, is a community, much like the city of Madison is, or the city of Freeman. And soil is no different. It's made up of life, of bacteria, fungi, worms, all interacting in a very natural way to provide soil balance and soil health. And so whatever we do with organic farming, we have to remember that we are stewards of a community, not just black dirt. I think the vision of a completely clean looking field is never going to be there, but also be prepared to operate your farm on a basis that it makes money for you because you're doing the right thing and you're doing the right practices. Well, it's so important that you have a rotation in mind. We follow ours pretty strictly. I know maybe other operators will be a little bend and give depending on the year or the circumstances. But with our 6-year rotation, I like to break it down to 4 different metrics. You know, is it annual versus perennial? Is it legume versus grass? Is it row crop versus smother crop? And so, you know, you work those metrics in, you got to make sure that your rotation touches on all those aspects. And so our rotation, I think, is pretty simple and basic. We are 3 years of row crop and 3 years what I call smother or cover crop. And so if you remember the dynamic of the movie Karate Kid, he used to say, wax on, wax off. Well, with our rotation, it's smother crops, which is the oats and alfalfa, wax on, wax off. And when we wax off, then we go to row crops, wax on and wax off. And so we like that aspect that we are only 50% into that aspect. The other 50% of our farm is involving a small grain and alfalfa. So we're using those, what I call off years, to provide that weed control, to provide that rest and healing for the land, allowing it to rejuvenate itself. It also diversifies our operation so that we're not strictly all just corn and beans. We have small grains that we can sell, alfalfa that we can feed to our cattle. And so, you know, it keeps us real diversified. The other thing I like about our rotation, it keeps us busy pretty much throughout what I call the farming calendar months. You know, once we start with small grain seeding and calving in April, all the way to putting manure compost onto our fields in November, we're busy pretty much every week of those 8 to 9 months. And so it's a little bit different than a lot of my neighboring farmers where everything is in a buzz between mid-April to mid-May planting and spraying, and then doing the harvesting in October and November. And so again, going back to that aspect of keeping more people on the land and more family members involved, we're actively able to keep our family members involved with the farming operation throughout all those months. Well, presently our farm is certified by a firm called Where Food Comes From. They're based out of Castle Rock, Colorado. But the firm that we've worked with through the years, and they're still operating out of Medina, North Dakota, is Farm Verified Organic. We became involved probably in the early 80s with Farm Verified Organic. And basically at that time, it was peer review. You know, it was certifying. Fellow organic farmers came and visited your farm, and they took a look at your operation, and they verified that you were organic. In return, you were responsible to visit and certify another person's farm or farms. And so that was kind of the basis of a lot of certification in the early stages. And then, of course, the National Organic Program came into aspect, and then it became more formalized. And so you basically had third parties that were doing the basis of the organic, basically following the NOP rule and then putting those practices into work. You have to have a plan. I mean, you just can't show up with your tractor in the field in the middle of May and say, well, I think I'm going to do this today. you pretty much have to have your rotation thought out, your inputs thought out as to what you're going to have, and get them listed. It's not an ironclad thing, though, because if circumstances change for you during the year, or you need to do more or less with something, basically you just make record of that, or let your certifier know. Most operations are visited once a year, usually in the summer and growing months, by an organic inspector. They're not your advisor. They're not your we're going to get you type person. They're just there to verify what you've said in previous instructions to the certification agency. This is what I'm doing on the farm. And so I have found the process to be pretty smooth in actuality. We've been pretty fortunate. We've been able to supply just about all of our seed organically through the years. And I strongly encourage organic farmers to purchase their seed through an organic source, because the only way we're going to have an organic seed supply is to patronize those firms or those companies that are doing the research and the growing aspects to provide that seed. I've taken a philosophical approach to inputs, especially when it comes to pests and weeds. I really think in organic farming that tithing comes into play. I mean, when you start with a crop and a seed, you basically have nothing, and then it turns into what I call 100%. And, if the pests and the weeds are requiring a little bit of tithing on your part, that you don't quite get all those bushels back that you thought you were going to have, that's just part of being a farmer and a steward of the land. And so we keep it to one basic input. We do procure composted poultry manure, and or some people call it dried poultry litter. And we do use that on our row crop acres. With our cow-calf herd, we view that as a major source of fertility too. We don't compost as such, but we do take all of our cattle manure, we push it up, we pile it up, and then during the late summer, fall months, we will windrow it out. We won't take it to the fields right away. We'll actually roll it out and allow that manure to be stirred up. It heats up quite. It also stays thawed out. So when we get into post-harvest weeks, we're able to haul this manure/compost type product out to our fields, and we haul it onto our fields that are in alfalfa. And then we're not up, having manure spreaders and tractors driving on ground that's going to be in row crop the following year, because compaction can cause weed issues, and so it helps with that. The other thing that we're doing more now lately is we're taking our alfalfa part of our rotation, because actually we're raising more tonnage of alfalfa than we need for our cows. And so rather than haying and baling alfalfa, we're using it as a green manure fertilizer input. And so we're just taking the mower out there and clipping it. And we've been helped a little bit in these first few years doing that with a CSP contract through NRCS.